The senator from Texas.
I thank my friend from Kansas for his leadership and for his reasonable call that we ascertain the truth on this very important matter. As we do every year, last week as a nation, we mark the somber anniversary of the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001. For the first time this year, we also remembered the victims of Benghazi. Foreign Service Officer Sean Smith, former Navy SEALs Glenn Dougherty and Tyrone Woods, and Ambassador Christopher Stevens, who was our first ambassador murdered while serving since Adolph Dubs in 1979. The anniversary of the Benghazi attacks, however, should not simply be an act of remembrance. It should serve as a wake-up call. An entire year has gone by since these American heroes lost their lives in the service of our nation, and we still have far too many unanswered questions. Why was the State Department unwilling to provide the requested level of security in Benghazi? Why were no military assets mobilized while the attacks were going on, even if they might not arrive before the attacks were over? If then Secretary Panetta had, quote, no question in his mind that this was a coordinated terrorist attack while it was going on, why did Ambassador Rice, Secretary Clinton, and President Obama all tell the American people that the cause was a spontaneous demonstration about an internet video in the days after September 11th, 2012? Why did the State Department edit the intelligence talking points to delete the references to, quote, Islamic extremists and al-Qaeda? Why did the FBI not release pictures of militants taken the day of the attack and release them only 8 months after the fact? Why not immediately, as proved so effective in the Boston bombing last April? What role, if any, did the State Department's own counterterrorism office play during the attack in their immediate aftermath? Why have none of the survivors testified to Congress? And why do the Benghazi whistleblowers still fear retaliation and retribution? To get the answers to these questions, we need to hear from the survivors of the attack to gain firsthand understanding of what happened that night. We need to ensure that the whistleblowers on Benghazi can tell their stories without fear of reprisals. We need the President to make good on his promise of September 12th, 2012, quote, to bring justice to the killers who attacked our people. That still has yet to happen. Over the past year, it has become evident that we need a joint select committee to get these things, because we have an administration that is actively trying to avoid learning more about Benghazi. We have a former Secretary of State who responds to congressional inquiries about why we were attacked in Benghazi with, quote, what difference at this point does it make? We have a current Secretary of State who responds to congressional inquiries about why the administration deliberately misidentified the nature of the attack by saying that he does not want to spend a whole year, quote, coming up here talking about Benghazi in Congress. We have a White House press secretary who responds to press inquiries about difficulties interviewing the survivors by simply dismissing Benghazi as something that, quote, happened a long time ago. And we have a president who complains that, quote, phony scandals are distracting him from his domestic agenda, by which his press secretary clarified the next day he meant the IRS targeting and Benghazi. In addition, we have seen in recent weeks an escalating pattern of obstruction by the administration into any investigation into Benghazi and a reluctance to take any action to retaliate against the attack or to prevent a future episode. On August 14th, there were press reports that the team of special operators who were in Libya to track down those responsible for the Benghazi attack were being pulled out despite repeated recommendations for action, some as recent as August 7th. On August 20th, we learned that the only disciplinary actions taken after Benghazi would be reversed as the 4 State Department employees who had been placed on administrative leave after the attacks were reinstated. On August 23rd, The State Department said it was, quote, not prepared to allow the Benghazi survivors to testify to Congress, a denial that was reportedly reiterated by Secretary of State John Kerry on September 10th. On September 11th, we learned from the State Department's own internal review that the department is, quote, lagging behind in implementing the new security measures recommended after the Benghazi attack, with, for example, only 100 of the recommended 1,000 Marines being deployed for potential hotspots. On September 15th, we learned of serious allegations in a draft House Committee for Oversight and Government report that the Accountability Review Board report requested by Secretary Clinton whitewashed the responsibility of senior State Department officials for the decisions that resulted in the lack of proper security at Benghazi facilities. And just today, at a House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing, Undersecretary of State for Management Patrick Kennedy admitted that the FBI investigation in Benghazi has ground to an indefinite halt because of the security situation in Libya. Mr. Kennedy also asserted in this hearing that the reassignment of 4 State Department employees represented, quote, serious accountability for the 4 Americans who died in Benghazi. This state of affairs, in a word, is unacceptable. Truth is not partisan, and every member of this body should want to ascertain what happened. Given the year-long collective failure of our government either to gain clarity on what happened in Benghazi on September 11th or to extract any retribution for the terrorist attack, Congress should now form a joint select committee to launch a proper investigation. The attacks on our diplomatic facilities in Benghazi are part of a larger threat we have faced for the last 12 years from radical Islamic terrorism. We cannot let this anniversary pass with just, quote, a thought, a hope, a prayer, or a wish, as Secretary Kerry recommended in an all-staff email to the State Department regarding the Benghazi attack. We need a chief counsel who can systematically ascertain the truth and can follow the actual facts of what happened that night to their full and logical conclusion, wherever that may lie, so that we can honor these American heroes and we can ensure that we're doing everything we can to prevent this sort of attack from ever happening again. If we refuse to seek the answers to these questions, then we are inviting future tragedies. We have 4 dead Americans. It has been a full year. My co-sponsors on this recommendation and I have had enough without answers and without the truth. I therefore ask unanimous consent the Rules Committee be discharged from further consideration of Senate Resolution 225, that the Senate proceed to its consideration, that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion to reconsider be made and laid on the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
I object, and I would like to explain why, if that would be appropriate for the next 2 minutes, if I could.
Objection is heard. The Senator may proceed.
Thank you. I'm proud to be on the Foreign Relations Committee for many years, and this Benghazi tragedy occurred, and the Foreign Relations Committee held hours of hearings. I sat through those hearings. And I want to say to my friends, I share their dismay that we haven't caught the perpetrators, but I want to remind them that the president who caught Osama bin Laden, who killed so many of our people, was President Obama, and when he says he's going to do something, he won't rest until he does it. Now, Secretary Clinton immediately called for an accountability review board, and that accountability review board was not partisan. And what my colleague wants to do is set up some kind of committee filled with politicians, of which I happen to be proud that I'm one, but I put more faith, frankly, in the professionalism and the nonpartisanship of the Accountability Review Board. Who headed that Accountability Review Board? Ambassador Thomas Pickering, who was first picked for public service under the first George Bush, and Admiral Michael Mullen, former head of the Joint Chief of Staff. Now, there are many other reasons why I oppose this. Secretary Kerry has addressed this and continues to address it. We had 2 classified briefings. The Intelligence Committee is preparing to release a bipartisan support on the events that occurred in Benghazi. And last December, Homeland Security released a bipartisan report on the security deficiencies. And the good news is, of course, as a result of this tragedy, changes have been made all over the world. So I sense there's politics here. You know, I sense there's politics here. And I don't think it's right to inject politics into such a tragedy. And therefore, I object.
Mr. President.